father murdered in Mississippi, but the truth was darker than anyone imagined. It was a quiet evening in Mississippi when the unthinkable happened. Neighbors reported hearing a single gunshot echoing through the darkness near the sprawling estate of Thomas Harrington, a wealthy businessman known for his charm, power, and deep pockets. Minutes later, his lifeless body was found on the driveway, a pool of blood staining the gravel beneath the soft glow of the porch lights. The entire town was shaken. Harrington wasn't just rich, he was influential, connected to politicians, bankers, and landowners. His sudden death sent shockwaves through both high society and the working class community that depended on his businesses. The question spread like wildfire. Who would dare kill him, and why? Police arrived quickly, but the scene raised more questions than answers. No forced entry, no signs of robbery. His wallet and expensive watch remained untouched. Whoever had killed him hadn't come for his valuables, they had come for him. This was no random crime, it was deliberate. Detectives began interviewing family members, and the picture that emerged wasn't as polished as the public had believed. His wife, Margaret, admitted their marriage had been strained for years. His children whispered about arguments over inheritance and control of the family fortune, and then there were the rumors, dark whispers about enemies Harrington had made in secret. Local gossip hinted at shady business deals, affairs with younger women, and feuds with powerful rivals. In a town where everyone seemed to owe Harrington something, there was no shortage of motives. The police were drowning in suspects, his own family included. The security cameras that covered his mansion mysteriously stopped working that very night. Investigators discovered they had been manually shut off, suggesting an inside job. Someone close to Harrington had known his routines, his vulnerabilities, and the exact time to strike. The autopsy revealed more chilling details. The bullet was from a rare firearm, not commonly used, but one traced back to a wealthy collector in the area. Suddenly, the investigation shifted from random speculation to a dangerous game of unraveling powerful secrets. The Harrington family lawyer, when pressed, revealed that Thomas had changed his will just 2 weeks before his death, cutting out certain relatives and shifting millions into a trust fund for an unknown beneficiary. The motive was becoming clearer: greed. But who stood to gain the most? Detectives pressed harder on the widow, Margaret. She denied involvement, but couldn't explain why her phone records showed late-night calls to a man with a criminal history. The walls were closing in, but just as suspicion mounted against her, a shocking twist emerged. A neighbor came forward, claiming to have seen a shadowy figure lurking near the estate hours before the murder. Not Margaret, not one of the children, but someone unexpected, someone Harrington had trusted for years, the very person who had been by his side through every business deal, every secret, his oldest friend and business partner. The revelation stunned the investigators. Harrington's longtime partner, Charles Whitman, had been like family. Together, they had built their empire from the ground up. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming. Financial audits showed that millions had gone missing from company accounts, and Thomas had reportedly confronted Charles just days before his death. Police dug deeper into Charles's alibi. He claimed he was out of town the night of the murder, attending a conference in New Orleans, but hotel records revealed he never checked in. Instead, his car was spotted by a traffic camera less than 5 miles from Harrington's estate. His perfect story was already unraveling. Investigators subpoenaed text messages between Charles and Margaret, Thomas's wife. What they found was damning: late-night conversations, cryptic messages about finally being free, and veiled references to a new beginning. Was this just coincidence or a murder conspiracy between lover and friend? Meanwhile, Harrington's children grew restless. They had suspected their father's death was more than a random crime, but to hear whispers that their mother was involved left them shaken. Some refused to believe it, while others admitted they had noticed her growing closeness with Charles for months. The case broke wide open when a shell casing found near the driveway was matched to a firearm registered in Charles's name, a rare collectible pistol. He claimed it had been stolen weeks earlier, but there was no police report, no proof. Investigators now have physical evidence tying him to the murder. When confronted, Charles's demeanor shifted from confident to defensive. "I loved him like a brother," he insisted, but his eyes betrayed panic. Detectives pressed harder, pointing out the financial motive, the affair, the inheritance, the missing millions. Slowly, the walls closed in until he asked for a lawyer. Margaret was next. She sobbed during questioning, swearing she knew nothing of Charles's plans. But under pressure, she admitted Thomas had threatened to leave her with nothing after discovering her betrayal. Her tears weren't just grief, they were fear of losing the life of luxury she had clung to. The district attorney announced charges against Charles for first-degree murder, with Margaret named as a possible co-conspirator. The town was in shock. A wealthy family's polished image had collapsed into scandal, betrayal, and bloodshed. Everyone wondered, would Margaret turn on Charles to save herself? In court, the drama reached new heights. Prosecutors laid out a chilling picture: a man consumed by greed, a wife desperate to keep her fortune, and a plot to eliminate the one person standing in their way. The defense tried to paint Thomas as a cruel tyrant, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for just 2 days before returning with a verdict: guilty. Charles was sentenced to life without parole. Margaret, who testified against him in exchange for leniency, walked free, but forever branded as the widow who betrayed her husband. Yet, even as justice was served, one question lingered: was she truly innocent? Or had she played the deadliest game of all? Whispers began spreading after the trial ended. Some townsfolk insisted justice hadn't been fully served. Tonight, they said, teasy. Detectives themselves wondered if Margaret had been so entangled with Charles. Why hadn't she faced harsher punishment? What had she given prosecutors behind closed doors to walk away free? Then came the leak. An anonymous envelope was delivered to the local sheriff's office. Inside were photocopied documents, offshore bank transfers, secret accounts, and the unmistakable signature of Thomas Harrington himself, but the dates on the transfers were recent to recent. They were logged days before his supposed death. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation. If Harrington was already moving money offshore before he died, it suggested he knew something was coming. Was he preparing for a fallout? Or worse, was his murder part of a larger cover-up? Detectives revisited the crime scene photos with fresh eyes. Something seemed odd about the trajectory of the bullet, the angle of the wound. A forensic expert admitted privately that the autopsy left room for questions, had they been too quick to rule it as straightforward shooting. Meanwhile, Margaret's lifestyle didn't falter after the trial. Despite the collapse of Harrington's empire, she still had money flowing. Investigators traced her expenses and uncovered new accounts. Linked to shell companies in the Caribbean, it was money Thomas had hidden, money she wasn't supposed to know about. A new theory emerged. What if Margaret hadn't just conspired with Charles? What if she and Thomas had been entangled in something dark or legal deals? Hidden enemies and Charles had been a convenient scapegoat. Suddenly, the narrative of jealous lovers seemed almost too convenient. The Harrington children pushed for answers. They hired private investigators, determined to learn the truth about their father's death. Late one evening, the eldest daughter received a chilling phone call. A raspy voice whispered, "Your father's death wasn't what it seemed. Look closer, he was never meant to die that night." Then the line went dead. Terrified but determined, she dug into her father's business files. Buried deep in locked cabinets were contracts tied to land deals in Mississippi swamps lands, connected to powerful developers, politicians, and even organized crime. Thomas had been sitting on secrets worth far more than his fortune. The implication was clear. His murder wasn't just about love or inheritance, it was about silence. Someone wanted Harrington gone because he knew too much, and Charles's conviction might have been nothing more than the perfect distraction. As this truth began to surface, strange things started happening. The Harrington children reported being followed at night. Their private investigator's office was broken into, files vanished, and the widow, Margaret, who had seemed untouchable, was suddenly nowhere to be found. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. The Harrington children felt the pressure mounting. Every lead they uncovered seemed to vanish as quickly as it appeared. The eldest son, Daniel, confided to a friend that he believed his mother hadn't just disappeared, she'd been hidden. Either she's running from someone, he whispered, or someone powerful made her vanish. Investigators finally tracked down surveillance footage from a private airport to towns over. The grainy video showed a woman matching Margaret's description boarding a small jet late at night, flanked by two men in dark suits, no tickets, no flight plans. She was gone before anyone realized she had left. As suspicions deepened, whispers about organized crime grew louder. One name surfaced repeatedly, the Callahan family, an old Mississippi dynasty known for shady deals and quiet influence in state politics. They had the resources to erase people, silence witnesses, and manipulate trials. It turned out Thomas Harrington had been negotiating against the Callahans. He'd owned key parcels of land they needed for a billion-dollar development project. Records suggested he had refused. Their offers perhaps even threatened to expose their corruption. That alone was motive enough to want him dead. The conviction of Charles suddenly seemed even more suspicious. Could the Callahans have planted evidence, twisted testimonies, and framed Harrington's closest friend to shift the spotlight? If so, Margaret's cooperation might not have been betrayal, it might have been survival. Late one night, Daniel received another mysterious call. This time, the voice was urgent, almost frantic. "Your father didn't die for money. He died because he said no. And your mother, she said yes." The line went dead again. The message was crystal clear. The children began piecing together their father's final days. His calendar revealed a secret meeting scheduled just hours before his death. No notes, no details. Just the word decision. Who had he met, and what choice had cost him his life? Meanwhile, the FBI quietly entered the picture. Agents visited the Harrington children, warning them to stay quiet for their own safety. The children pressed for answers, but the agents offered none. Their presence only confirmed what the family suspected. This was bigger than a domestic murder case. The small Mississippi town, once buzzing with gossip about infidelity and greed, now hummed with fear. People stopped talking. Neighbors who had once whispered freely about the Harringtons suddenly clammed up. It was as if an invisible hand had pressed down on the entire community. The deeper they looked, the clearer the picture became. Thomas Harrington had stood against forces far more powerful than himself. His death wasn't a simple betrayal, it was a warning. And now, his children, by digging too deeply, were in danger of becoming the next targets of the same shadowy empire. Daniel and his sister Emily knew they couldn't back down. Their father's legacy was more than money, it was truth. One evening, Emily uncovered an encrypted flash drive hidden inside a hollow book. In her father's study, on it were documents, maps, and names. It was a blueprint of everything he had been fighting against. The files revealed millions in illegal kickbacks tied to land development projects. Judges, senators, and even law enforcement officials were on the payroll. Thomas hadn't just been a wealthy businessman, he had been a man trying to stand against a machine. His death was a message: silence or suffer. Emily trembled as she scrolled through the names. Some were people she saw at church on Sundays. Others were family friends who had attended dinners in their home. It's all connected. She whispered, everyone we trusted. The siblings reached out to a journalist from New Orleans, a man known for exposing corruption. They met him in secret, sliding the flash drive across a diner table. If something happens to us, Daniel said firmly, make sure the world sees this. The journalist nodded, but even he looked frightened. Not long after, strange cars began parking across from their house. Their phones clicked with interference, and one night, Emily woke to find a note slipped under her door. It read in chilling handwriting, stop digging, or you'll join your father. Instead of retreating, the siblings grew bolder. They started piecing together their father's timeline, linking meetings and transactions to the names on the flash drive. Every discovery deepened the conspiracy, and every step drew them closer to danger. The FBI agent who had once warned them returned, this time in plain clothes. You don't understand. He whispered urgently, this isn't just local corruption, it goes higher than you think. If you release that information, you won't just be risking your lives, you'll be starting a war. But Daniel clenched his fists. Then let it be war, he said. My father died for standing his ground. I won't let them bury him as a greedy man when he was fighting for something bigger. His words carried both fire and fear. The siblings went into hiding, sending copies of the flash drive to multiple journalists across different states. If they vanished, the truth would survive. They had become a hunted butt, and exposing their father's killers, they also became his voice. As headlines began to break about the Harrington files, panic rippled through the corridors of power. Politicians denied involvement, judges stepped down, and whispers of arrests spread. But for Daniel and Emily, it was only the beginning, because the same shadowy hands that killed their father were now reaching for them. The Harrington children stayed on the move, never sleeping in the same place twice. Safe houses, motels, even friends' attics became temporary shelters. Every time they looked over their shoulders, they half expected black SUVs to appear. The closer the story spread, the greater the danger. National media seized the Harrington files, exposing layer after layer of corruption. Senators called for investigations, but others dismissed it all as fabricated nonsense. The nation was divided. But one truth was clear: Thomas Harrington hadn't died in vain. His fight was now public. Late one night, Emily's phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something told her to answer. A calm voice said, your father wasn't supposed to die that night. The bullet wasn't meant for him, it was meant for you. Before she could reply, the line went dead. Tears welled in her eyes. They tried to silence our family long before Dad died. She whispered to Daniel. The revelation added a chilling layer to the mystery. Maybe Thomas's murder wasn't just about business. Maybe it was about erasing the Harrington bloodline itself. Then came the explosion. One morning, as Daniel started his truck, the engine roared unnaturally. Instinctively, he jumped out seconds before the vehicle erupted into flames. Someone had planted a bomb. The message was clear: back off, or the next one wouldn't miss. Instead of retreating, Daniel and Emily went public, appearing live on national television. They told the world about the threats, the car bombing, and the voices warning them to stop. If we disappear, Emily declared, know that it wasn't by choice. Millions watched, horrified and captivated. The public outcry was massive. Thousands demanded justice. Federal agencies were forced to act, raiding Callahan properties across Mississippi. Dozens of arrests followed. But whispers remained that the true power players, the ones pulling strings behind the scenes, still walked free. Through all the chaos, one mystery remained: Margaret Harrington. Her disappearance had never been solved. Some believed she was hiding abroad, funded by secret accounts. Others whispered she had been silenced permanently, buried alongside the truth she once tried to conceal. On the anniversary of their father's death, Daniel and Emily visited his grave. The storm of media, threats, and betrayals had left them scarred but stronger. As Emily laid flowers, she whispered, we finished what you started, Dad. They couldn't silence you. But as they turned to leave, Daniel noticed a figure standing in the distance, a woman, half hidden in the shadows, watching for a fleeting second. Her posture, her eyes, looked hauntingly familiar. Then, as quickly as she appeared, she was gone. Was it Margaret, or just a ghost of the past? The siblings walked away, knowing their story and their father's war was far from over.